A woman returns home feeling drained from a long day of work, so she sits down at her kitchen table filled with anticipation. She reaches across the table to a jar.
I do believe him, Otto. I meant like, I can't believe that happened. Like, oh my God, you know?
Its contents swish and turn as she
it the
pulls
pink
it
slime
towards
thing?
her.
I don't
She
think...
sticks a fork into the floating
Maybe?
blue-gray mass at the bottom, piercing a chunk and lifting it out of the swirling slough to deposit the wet, rancid nugget on her tongue. A foul, putrid smell radiates through the room. She takes another slimy covered cube of rotten meat into her mouth. The jar was on top of her fridge for the last half year, so she expected the taste, but she never thought it would feel so good? Okay, but why are people eating raw meat they've left out in jars for months at a time? Why?
What in the...
And with that out of the way, let's get into it. Raw, uncooked, putrefied meat has been lovingly dubbed high meat among the
It
initiated.
gets them high?
Trigger
Hi, Bella.
warning, here comes the meat.
As the name suggests, it's being eaten because the internet heard it could get them high.
What?
Some consumers describe feelings of euphoria and hallucinations after slurping down diced chunks of decaying meat. They also claim that the bacterial growth is beneficial to their gut microbiomes.
These people know that yogurt and tempeh exist, right? Right?
Probably, but there's more to this
Bella.
unfortunate fetid flesh fetish. Just so we can get an idea of what the dangers of eating raw or rotten meat are, these are just a few of the many meat-borne illnesses that have plagued humanity for thousands of years.
Oh, goody. This'll be fun.
Oh, it will be. All right, because I care about you two, let's throw on some wholesome TV so we can all heal together. With today's sponsor, NordVPN, I'll change our location settings so we can watch our comfort movie, School
What
of
the
Thought.
heck?
Well, they have over
Sponsors!
5,000 servers in over 60 countries. No data logging and double encryption.
He had me there.
There's no downside.
He
Your
had
identity
me.
and data stay safe. And
I was
you have
like,
the
the
best VPN of
suspense.
2020
What's happening?
according to Best VPN Awards.
Silly Brew, in this house we love NordVPN and our 24/7 customer support.
Not to mention Nord's 30-day money-back guarantee and the fact that they can help you get past any government
How are you
restrictions.
doing, Bella?
NordVPN can keep me and up to 6 of my loved ones safe from prying eyes when we're out using public Wi-Fi.
Nord is currently offering their Cyber Month deal. So go to nordvpn.com/bro to get a 2-year plan plus 1 additional month. They'll even throw in a bigger discount just for signing up.
Go to nordvpn.com/brew
Do you guys
for more info on
like it when
NordVPN.
people do sponsors like this? I mean, it helps out the
After
creator,
eating an old
right?
can of corned beef, a young man feels a sudden loss of feeling in his face. His eyelids droop, his breath becomes more labored, and he can no longer form words. His stomach cramps, and he cannot stop vomiting. And slowly, he feels himself losing the ability
You
to
skipped the
feel his
generic
hands or
ones?
feet. Later, in the hospital, he loses all feeling, and his breathing
like it when they add
groans to a
timestamps so you can
complete
skip it?
stop.
Ah.
That's botulism. You can avoid it by fully cooking or boiling your food, properly refrigerating any foods that use garlic or
Sammy
herbs.
needs to watch this
Never
video.
eating any food that smells
Sammy!
off.
Sorry, folks, just had to make that clear. A teenage girl, after a day spent enjoying homemade hamburgers with her family, wakes up in the middle of the night with a growing urgency in her bowels. She runs to the
Sammy
bathroom,
made this
but to no
recipe,
avail.
probably.
Her father is already there. There's blood in the toilet, he shouts in agony, so she runs upstairs to the other bathroom. But her mother is trapped inside, either vomiting or simply retching. Her brother beckons her over to the kitchen sink, which he is currently bent over in pain. I won't look, he says, as she weighs her options. That's E. coli. This bacteria dies
What
at
the
temperature
heck?
upward of 70 degrees, so properly washing, prepping, cooking, and refrigerating your food is the best method of household prevention. Also,
Don't eat anything that smells like it's gone bad.
an older gentleman wakes up one morning fatigued and
Jesus.
nauseated. He staggers to the bathroom, flicking on the light which makes his eyes ache. His eyes staring back at him from the mirror are swollen, and the rest of his face is so
That's
tender
crazy strong
he can
and
barely
kills.
touch it. He goes to the hospital, barely holding in his bowels on the way. An X-ray shows eggs in his cranial cavity. The doctor tells him that they're pressing up against his brain, causing inflammation. That's what happens if you eat trichinella worms from undercooked pork, which, hey, we talked about before here. Cook all meat to an internal temperature of 60 degrees and freeze any pork for a minimum of 3 weeks to kill any worms. Also, remember that smoking, curing, and pickling do not kill parasites. Also,
Don't eat any meat that has bacterial growth.
there's also Listeria, Salmonella, Staphylococcus, Campylobacter, Shigella, Streptococcus, Anthrax, and that's just some of the bad bacteria that can grow on tainted food.
Jesus!
Not to mention the countless more parasites and fungal growths.
Practicing proper food safety makes food safer. Who knew?
The point is that yes,
That a
there
condom?
are good bacteria, but there are just as many, if not more, bad bacteria that might give you stomach cramps. Some that can just straight up paralyze. There are just as many, if but
There is a cucumber with a condom and some alcohol.
there are just as many, if not more, bad bacteria that
That's
might give you stomach
yogurt.
cramps. Some that can just straight up paralyze you. Methods to make high meat vary significantly, but recipes, and I use the word recipes loosely, do have some similarities. One is that they're all wildly dangerous. Just to be very clear, high
Perfect
meat
combo.
is incredibly unsafe to eat. A YouTuber who demonstrates making high meat starts with an undisclosed meat, cuts it into little pieces, and then puts it in glass jars. After that, he just shuts the jars and leaves them out. He doesn't even put it into the fridge.
Ew.
After an indeterminate period of time, he takes a jar full of the mixture to show us the process, gagging as he opens it because it smells so bad.
Huh. Who knew rotten meat would smell bad? Learn something new every day.
Then he just eats a sludgy chunk of whatever meat he left in there.
I just can't understand why anyone would want that.
These recipes have next to no consideration for basic food safety. Not only is raw meat difficult to keep clean in the first place, the only mention of how one avoids illness in most of these methods is to buy from a trusted butcher, which does not guarantee safety. Lots of high meat proponents argue that fermentation is no different than what they are doing. That letting a bunch of meat cutlets decompose in a jar is the same as, say, making cheese or baking bread, which is not true. Curating the microbial life we desire in a product like cheese, pickles, or kimchi requires very specific conditions, ensuring that it not only tastes good, but is also safe to eat. One of these methods
kimchi.
is
I love
fermentation,
kimchi.
the process of cellular respiration without oxygen. It even happens inside our own bodies. Our cells use oxygen to help convert nutrients like carbs into energy. But when oxygen is unavailable, lactic acid is produced as a byproduct of that process.
Oh yeah, my yoga teacher told me that lactic acid is what makes your muscles sore after you work out.
We purposefully ferment food, and what
You're
the
not
end
hungry
product
anymore.
is depends on the addition of specific bacterial cultures. There are 3 basic types of fermentation. Lactic acid fermentation, which uses bacteria like lactobacillus to convert sugars into lactic acid, resulting in foods like sauerkraut, kimchi, pickles, yogurt, and sourdough.
Oh, that is
Ethyl
yogurt.
alcohol
I swear that was a
fermentation,
condom.
which uses yeast like Saccharomyces cerevisiae to break down sugars into alcohol and carbon dioxide, resulting in alcoholic beverages. Acetic acid fermentation, which uses bacteria like Gluconobacter
It
to
is.
convert sugars into acetic acid, resulting in vinegar instead of alcohol. It's the difference between apple cider and apple cider vinegar.
I believe you, man.
Fermentation
Thank
in
you,
food
Bella.
production
Thank you for having my
requires
back.
specific conditions that are strictly monitored.
I don't
Yogurt
have
is
yogurt.
made by first heating up milk to a temperature of 185
It's
degrees
very hard
Fahrenheit
to find
for
yogurt
30
I
minutes
can
to
eat.
kill off any spoilage organisms. Bacteria that turns milk sour. Then it's cooled to 108 degrees Fahrenheit, where the good bacteria
They
we
have
want
coconut-
can
I
grow,
haven't found any
whereupon
coconut milk
adding
here.
lactobacillus will
Coconut milk
start the
yogurt.
fermentation process.
Yeah, I don't think making yogurt is just leaving milk somewhere.
My point exactly.
Okay, this time I got a real question. What's the difference between high meat
not great?
and dry-aged
Oh.
steak? They're both just leaving meat somewheres, right?
A dry-aged steak is kept in a dry aging room with tight controls on temperature and humidity to draw
Ew.
moisture out of the meat. The meat's natural enzymes break down the connective tissue, making it more tender, but it also creates an environment hostile to putrefying bacteria. If the temperature or the humidity is off by a fraction of a degree, it could throw off the entire process, and you'd end up with a bunch of rotten meat.
As someone who likes cooking, I can tell you that should be the end of the line.
Okay.
Curing is somewhat similar to the dry.
I have a question. So there's restaurants that have like a gigantic slab of a cow or something, right? And it's slowly rotating and it's like slowly smoking it, I think. But it's out in the open so people can watch what's happening, like, you know, like the process and stuff. Is that bad? Because it's they said earlier smoking does not remove bacteria. You just bite off the cow and skip the whole process. The firewood burns too high for bacteria to survive. The outside is sealed, and the heat outside allows the outside not to rot. Okay, so like it's on a rotating pole thingy, and behind it is like something that is creating a lot of smoke, right? In front, there is no barrier for the people that are walking by. If it doesn't have any heat around, then it's fucked. Okay. It doesn't remove parasites. Yeah, that's what the video said. Smoking doesn't remove parasites, but it's cooking it, right? That's a roast, yeah. Well, it was raw, but being slowly, I don't know. It wasn't, there was no cooking thingy to it that I could see because it was just a lot of smoke. Ah, okay. So what is smoking? What is smoking? Because that to me, I thought that was smoking because there's just a bunch of smoke. Smoking is a sealed room. Oh. Okay. There's a fire behind the meat. Yeah, I didn't see it because there's just like a lot of smoke there, so I didn't see any. I didn't even see what was like cooking it. Smoking is infusing smoke into the meat so it gets cooked afterwards. Got it. Okay, so when he said smoking just does not remove the parasites. So even if you eat meat that's been smoked, you could possibly have brain worms. What that meant. Yeah, that's why you cook it after. Okay. Not hot enough to kill them. Okay.
Dry aging process, except that moisture isn't drawn out of the meat by a dehumidifier, but by a boatload of dry salt or a salt brine. Bad bacterial growth is inhibited by salt,
For some
quickly
time after
making
it's
the meat a hostile environment to microorganisms that spoil meat.
So your dad does
So
it?
wait, is high meat fermented?
The short answer is no. The long answer is no. The longer answer is fermented meats are made using specific bacterial cultures after sterilizing the product beforehand with salt, heat, or chemicals. Fermentation, dry aging, and curing are all methods of controlled aging, whereas high meat is rampant decomposition. It's the difference between landing a plane and crashing. Many high meat advocates argue that indigenous cultures have been fermenting food for thousands of years. And they're absolutely right. Kasumarzu, A Sardinian sheep cheese passed through the guts of live maggots. Kivyak, Inuit-style fermented little auk birds stored in a sealskin over the winter. And century eggs, Chinese duck eggs pickled in a salt clay mix, are all examples of culturally significant aged foods. The problem is, people aren't taking the time to understand the history or the specific methods behind these dishes. Yes, casu marzu is maggot cheese, but the people making casu marzu are Sardinian sheep farmers whose families have been perfecting it since the fall of Rome. Curing, drying, and fermenting came from the determination and creativity of early humankind to preserve food
Yeah,
and
the
make
cheese
it
is
last
banned.
longer.
Yeah.
Because we kept dying of food poisoning before that.
Carefully and respectfully practicing traditional preservation techniques that have been passed down from one's ancestors is not the same as putting meat in a jar, and invoking someone else's culture to argue about its safety is insensitive at best. And I'm pretty sure we've all seen what it is at its worst. After all is said and done, I'm begging you, please do not eat rotten or putrid meat. The overwhelming scientific consensus is that eating rotten meat is legitimately and terrifyingly bad for you, ranging from basic food poisoning to
Leave
being
her
left
alone.
paralyzed or dead. While our gut microbiome does reap benefits
Oi.
from foods high in beneficial bacteria, putrefying bacteria isn't good for us. While it's likely that eating rotten meat could give you a euphoric feeling, there's no guarantee. Even if one batch feels good, the next could give you brain worms.
Let natural
maybe we
selection
should just
take
stick to
place?
making
True.
kimchi at home instead.